Greetings and salutations, friends and gamers of all stripes. My name's GM Dave, I am your man behind the screen, and today we're going to be following up on the previous video that we did on this channel, wherein we looked at the failings of the X card. However, this time around we're going to be taking a different approach, and in the interest of fairness, and also to sort of follow up on a few points that some people made in the comments of that video, we're going to be looking at what merits the X card actually does have. But a couple of things to note before we get started here. First and foremost, I want to make it clear at the start that my opinions on the X card have not changed. I still stand firm in the belief that the X card is ultimately a tool that is not fit for its purpose, and that it will, more likely than not, cause more harm to the health of your gaming table than it will bring good. But as with all tools, even the more ineffective ones do still have their uses, and so that's what we're going to be taking a look at here today. Some of the ways in which the X card actually can be useful, and how it can be used as a tool that will, more often than not, help your table, as opposed to hindering it with the many risks that it brings. Secondly, before we get started in this analysis proper, we need to address some issues that came up in the previous video. Bad information that made its way in because bad information was making the rounds surrounding the drama around Adam Koebel's game. In short, it's time for me, and through me some others as well, to eat a bit of crow. Because as it happens, it turns out that Adam's game was not actually an example of the failure of the X card. Because in the statement he made after the game, apparently what he had actually said was that his personal failing was his failure to implement the X card to begin with. Now right out of the gate here, I feel like I need to make it clear that no, Adam Koebel's failing in this scenario was not that he decided not to implement the X card into his game. His failing was either his inability to read the room, or his decision to ignore the reactions of his players and push on with a scene that they were visibly uncomfortable with anyway. With that being said, I still do stand behind my statements regarding the weaknesses of the X card. Again, I do not think it is a tool fit for purpose. My opinions there have not changed. But considering that it was the drama from Adam Koebel's stream which sparked up this conversation of the X card, a conversation that came to light due to a misunderstanding from his statement, again, the statement actually states that he never implemented the X card into his game, and that's what he thinks his failing was. I feel that it's only fair of me to take a look at it from another perspective, one that, while I don't personally agree with, I can at least see the merits of. So without any further preamble, let's go ahead and take a look at a couple of ways in which the X card can find meritorious use at your table. First among these, the X card's ability to potentially externalize a problem that a player might have come up at the table. Now, in my previous video, I stated many of the players who are going to need a tool like this probably aren't going to feel 100% comfortable with using this because in some ways it can put a target on them by having to bring out a physical tool. Even though they're not necessarily saying out loud themselves, it is still going to put a visible cue on their back that says, hey, I'm calling this out, I don't like this, please stop. Now, ideally, we should all feel comfortable enough in our gaming groups to be okay with saying that. But the reality of the situation is, not everyone is okay with saying that. And when we consider that fact, while I do still believe that the X card is going to come with that problem of many people feeling like it's going to paint a target on them, for many others who struggle with this same thing, it will also have the effect of externalizing the problem, of being something that they can look at and say, all I have to do is point to this thing or hold it up, and then later on, maybe we can talk about the issue after the game. But for now, I can just avoid this uncomfortable situation that I don't like without having to say it out loud by pointing to this card here on the table. Bearing this idea in mind, savvy GMs can then use the X card as a tool to maintain a little bit of extra order in their games as well. By having the players point to the X card instead of calling things out that they don't like, a GM could be made visibly aware, alright, there's a bit of a problem here, I'm going to need to find a way to skirt around this, and then, ideally, save that for a conversation to be had after the game so everyone can figure out what should be done with these sorts of issues going forward. Now, ideally, these sorts of issues shouldn't be coming up. These sorts of issues should generally be covered in session 0, but obviously a session 0 is not always going to be able to take place, particularly in the realm of public play, which is the realm that the X card is meant to be most used in. It's meant to be used when you're meeting up with groups of random people in a hobby shop or at a con. So, considering that fact, the X card can, for a new group, as long as they are all in agreement, as long as they are willing to discuss it afterwards, it can be used to help these players who have these uncomfortable situations to externalize the problem, to push it out from themselves, and have a little bit of a safety net that will then hopefully lead into a conversation about how to handle similar situations going forward, either when the session ends or perhaps during a snack break or something like that. Additionally, it also provides a clear visual cue for the GMs involved if they're not really sure how to read this particular group. Again, this is something that is mainly going to apply to new groups or groups of random people getting together in a public place. This is because when it comes to new groups or groups meeting in public places with new players coming and going, there's going to be a lot of variable elements. Even a savvy GM is not necessarily going to be able to easily figure out the different ways in which players respond to things they're uncomfortable with. Because let's face it, people can do some weird things when they get uncomfortable with something. It's not always going to be as obvious as it was with the players in Adam Koebel's game. But that is something that careful use of the X card can help to mitigate. By having that clear visual cue, a GM who's not necessarily fully on board with the way that their players are going to react, or perhaps the GM is a particularly social awkward person themselves. Maybe this just isn't the kind of thing they usually notice. That external visual cue, that clear item on the board that says, "This is uncomfortable for me, let's please move on to something else," is a good way for them to not only get a clear indicator of when something is kind of going too far, acting as a visual reminder for them of when they should consider fading to black or putting the scenario back into the hands of the players so that they can decide how to respond to the uncomfortable situation. And this is important. Recall that one of my major gripes about the X card is the way in which it tends to wrench power away from people as opposed to actually really giving it to people. It doesn't just wrench power away from the GMs, it also does have the power to wrench it away from players. So we want to be mindful about this fact. We want to be able to use this as a tool that gives the power back to everyone at the table. We don't want to use it to wrest control from everyone. We just want to use it as a reminder, a visual cue for the less aware among us. So again, it not only has the power to act as a tool for less aware or more socially awkward GMs to recognize when they should fade to black, but also as a way for GMs to start paying attention to the kind of facial expressions and physical reactions that these players are giving when they use the X card, so that they can better prepare themselves to read the table, read the room, read the reactions of the players, and know instinctively in the future how to react next time. Because truthfully, if you are going to use the X card, whether you agree with my beliefs on it or not, if you are going to use it, I think we can all agree that the goal should be for this to be a temporary tool. Just as with any tool that exists that is meant to help build a more cohesive and healthy gaming group, whether it be something smaller and more simplistic like the X card or something bigger and much more complex like a full session 0, the goal is for these to ultimately be temporary measures that we take. We don't want to have to use these permanently. We want to use these to help get to know what the players' expectations are, what the GM's expectations are, how we can read our groups, how we can understand each other, how we can communicate better, and therefore play better together so everyone at the table can enjoy the experience of the game. What we do not want is for these things to become permanent fixtures that we have to rely on every single time we play. Any and all gaming groups out there could tell you they wouldn't want to have to run an hour-long pre-session talk before every single game they play. They wouldn't want to have to do what is ostensibly a pre-game session zero every single time to re-establish their dynamic, nor are they going to feel like they need to. Even the most awkward among us are social animals. I can say from personal experience, not only for myself, having once been an incredibly awkward person with my own weird social anxieties, but from having played with other peoples of varying ages who have Down syndrome, autism, ADHD, clinical depression, all kinds of mental issues like that. Every single one of them, even those who had the greatest difficulty doing so, did start to learn how the dynamic worked, how to interact with other people, how to get better at that just through simple practice. And through simple practice, got better at expressing themselves when they ran into situations they weren't entirely cool with. And so if you are going to use the X card, no matter what you might think about my personal beliefs on it, if you are going to use it, do your best to make sure that it becomes a temporary measure. Work with your groups to make sure that 1, it is not abused, and 2, that it is used to help uplift them, to improve them as gamers, to improve yourselves as gamers, so that you eventually don't need it anymore and can get rid of it altogether. And that is just about all I have to say on the subject of the X cards, friends and gamers. Once again, I do want to make clear here that my opinions on the X card, even after considering these merits, still have not changed. I do still firmly believe that this is a tool that is not fit for its stated purpose, but my personal dislike of it should not preclude me from being able to look at it and see what merits it does have. And I'd like to think that I was able to successfully do that here today. And so, friends and gamers, with all of that said and done, once again, if you liked this video, please feel free to leave it a like, share your thoughts with me in the comments down below, and make sure you open up the description box to follow me on my social media platforms. The best places to reach out to me are Minds and Facebook, and while you're down there, why not hop over to Webtoons through the link down below and read my webcomic Phoenix Rising. If you're into high fantasy and a bit of adventure, then I'm sure you'll have a little bit of fun with it. So with all of that now said and done, yet again, friends and gamers of all stripes, my name is GM Dave. I am your man behind the screen. And remember, in the world of tabletop gaming, you don't just want to sit there and watch. Get out there and game.